topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Hello. Welcome to
Matt.
Entrepreneurs Ascending, and welcome, Kat.
Thank you. I'm glad
It's great
to be here.
Well, it's wonderful having you here today because this is a couple topics that are just so critical this day and age, especially I think maybe even post-COVID world, maybe even in some ways it could be even more important. But we're talking about two different topics today, and I'll introduce Kat here in a second. But we're talking about basically first part is really reprogramming yourself for success, and what does that mean? Because we're going to talk about a couple of things that Kat is a specialist on NLP and emotional wisdom training, and then we're gonna actually talk in the second half about healing from the past and how that can help us to really achieve more in the future. So thank you, Kat, so much for being on here with us today.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, Kat, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about you and your background so they just kind of know who you are?
Yes. My background started many moons ago in another life in management from the time I was 19 years old. Mm-hmm. And I served in the mom and pop home health agencies to the big corporate world in medical waste management, which is a whole another process in of its own. And then I left the corporate world and decided, okay, I actually didn't leave on my own. They were restructuring for the fourth or fifth time, and my region was structured into 3 other people. So imagine that. So I survived 4 of them. But when the vice president called me, he was very solemn, and he says, "Kat, I'm so sorry. Your position has been eliminated. We do have other positions available at the corporate world, but it was in Chicago, and I don't live in Chicago, and wasn't time to move." But I was very happy when he called because I was working anywhere from 60 to 90 hours a week, if you can imagine that.
Oh, yeah.
And traveling, stepping from one plane to another. And so that's what brought me to today. And that's been about 7 years ago now. And I started coaching 6 years ago. And I was just doing some soul searching with friends. And a good friend, Mary Brown, brought me to emotional wisdom training. And I had gone to other coaching platforms and decided that this was the one. And so this is what I do now. I coach, I mentor women in my own business, and I subcontract with Emotional Wisdom Training Institute to instruct in their leadership and coaching program.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. So emotional wisdom training, can you tell us a little bit more about what is emotional wisdom training? Because it's got some really interesting. Emotional wisdom tells a lot, but I don't think that the audience probably has heard of it before. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, emotional wisdom training starts with an experience, right? We have emotions that are attached to experiences. So first we have, let's say we have an experience, and then we have a subconscious mind. That attaches a color to it of sorts, like a label to it, for lack of a better word. And that then becomes like the emotion. What is the emotion attached to that event? And then we carry that with us throughout our lives, and it tends to stay with us for a very long time. Our subconscious mind stores everything, everything we've ever experienced, good, bad, happy, sad, and we keep those emotions, whether we know it or not. We may think we're over something, and that relationship is gone, and we think, oh, I'm over it, and then you move on into your life, and you suddenly cannot connect with other relationships, and you wonder why. And so you have to reel back and see where those emotions come in. Where did this start? And so I say we as Emotional Wisdom Training Institute and Taproots for Life, which is my own business, we help people identify those emotions, and we help people move forward in those emotions, and not we don't have them ponder those emotions too long, because then we start this thing called spinning, emotional spinning, and we start talking about all these other things and things that don't even pertain to the emotion that we're talking about. And so we don't stay in that emotion very long, and we help the client move forward from that emotion, but just identify it and know what it is and take a look at it and learn from that. So that's where the wisdom comes in, the emotional wisdom. Once we help people and train their minds to recognize that emotion, then they can move forward with other things, different, they can change what they want to do in life. They can attract relationships. They can do anything they want, actually. So that's what emotional wisdom training is.
Okay. So kind of learning and understanding, what the emotions you have are and what they're tied to, I guess.
Yes.
What kind of experiences in life.
We attach emotions to everything. Everything. That's who we are as humans.
And then how does that relate to NLP or neuro-linguistic programming? Or I guess first, does it relate to that? And then I guess we should kind of explain that better.
Yeah, it does. It does relate to that in a lot of ways. So you hear the acronym NLP thrown around a lot these days with coaching, and everybody's like, "Oh, I want to, learn NLP." NLP simply is neuro-linguistic programming, and what it means is that we all have programs running in our minds. That's our subconscious mind that collects all of the emotion attachments, and so we all have programs running in our minds. And the neuro-linguistic is the language that comes with those programs. It's language we heard from as far back as before we were born, when we were inside the womb of our mother. We could hear people talking outside the womb. Whether we knew what they were saying or not is another thing, but the tone, we picked up on the tone and the level of sound. And from the time we're in the womb and forward, we learn language. And I've even learned most recently with neuroscience that we learn this genetically even. And so we can even carry some of that language forward genetically, and they call it epigenetics. And so NLP is, that whole term means that we have programs running, and it's the language in our minds. Now, there's another side of NLP, and neuro-linguistic programming is, it could also mean the practitioner involved with that. And that is like the practitioner actually, for lack of a better word, massages the language in working with the person. So we tell them first is identify the emotion and what are the words attached to that emotion. And then we decide, okay, are those words serving me right now, or do I need to use that experience for something else? So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, I love a couple of things there. I mean, first of all, understanding that we do have some like base programming that we're not even aware of.
Yes.
And when I work with my clients in with doing business coaching as I do, it you can definitely see that play out, because like some people will want to do stuff or certain things, or they will want to respond to things a certain way, but there's something holding them back, right? And so
Yes.
basically that's kind of some of that programming that we have, and
Yes.
that drives an emotional response that you were talking about before, right?
Yes. And a lot
Okay.
of, sometimes a lot of the coaching platforms will coach someone, and they might say, well, you need to do this or you need to do that. And when you do that, you're not really digging into the program that the person's running behind the scenes, that's holding them back, really. Like, you could give
Yeah.
them all the advice. Like, consultants are really good at giving advice, but really, if the person's running a program in their mind, it's not going to do them any good.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and that's something that and I personally just want to say, I've worked with Kat, and because I've seen that play out, and I think that we need to be real with ourselves, that it's not just about forcing ourselves to, well, I'm just going to make myself do it, or I'm just going to, because I see that a lot, and I feel like I see that a lot with a lot of business coaches, motivational speakers. They're out there saying, well, if you want to achieve something, you just got to work really hard and push yourself, and just, and then it's like, it's almost shaming people, because
Yeah.
they can't just push through it,
Yeah.
you know?
It's like, well, thank you for that, but how do I get there?
Right, right. How do I get there with my programming, right? Because everybody's program is a
Right.
little bit different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that works for their programming, but I think most people are not programmed that way, at least from is that fair to say? Probably.
Yeah, everyone's different. We all
Yeah.
we could be at the same party experiencing the same thing and have
Hmm.
different stories and different programs form in our mind, you know.
Yeah.
A good example of what you're talking about, just talking about just doing something, is when we set our New Year's resolution. So that's a
Yeah.
perfect example of, I'm going to lose weight this year, and I'm going to start right now, right here. Do you know that 80%, and this is from Forbes magazine back in 2020, Forbes magazine said that 80% of the people who form a New Year's resolution will fail in the second week
Yeah.
of when they set that resolution. So what does that
Yeah.
tell you? It tells you that people are not really working internally to get to that point. Yes, there's weight loss programs. Weight loss programs make a ton of money because they're not digging into the program of the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's maybe like take this through, like maybe an example, like so how might this play out? So we've got like a small business owner, and maybe he's done pretty well. Maybe he's even hit his first million, and then all of a sudden, he or she, let's just
Yeah.
say they,
Sure.
keep it really general. And so they hit their first million, and then all of a sudden, like, things kind of just start stagnating, and it's not growing anymore. It's kind of stopped. How might that relate to some of this NLP, or their programming and their emotional responses?
Yeah, that's a really good example. I think when we first start out with a business, there's that excitement, those sparks.
Yeah.
And when we are fully free of that, sometimes we are able to start from the unconscious heart. That's where we
Hmm.
create from. And people who are creators do that so easily. And entrepreneurs are a perfect example of those creators, because they're constantly creating, they're constantly
Hmm.
recreating new programs and new businesses. And
Yeah.
so once you get to the top, though, there's this place we call, and we did a program the other night, last night, as a matter of fact. It was the seasons of learning, and this was my interpretation of the levels of learning.
Hmm.
And we get to that point where we're first starting out, right? We don't know what we don't know. And then we begin to develop that idea, right? We find the idea and we develop it, and we start practicing it and dipping our toe in the water a little bit. and working with it.
Okay.
And then we get to that third level of, wow, I've got this, I'm really going for it. I'm making $1 million right now. And this is the best life I've ever had. And then we get so caught up in the language of what's going on around us that we forget where we started. Like we kind of lose that momentum, right? And so that's the danger zone of, we lose the focus of what we started doing this for in the first place.
Yeah.
And a lot of entrepreneurs start, very successfully because they're doing it from their heart. They're doing it from what they want to do, not what other people want them to do, right? And that's the mistake we all make. We get caught up in that, we wanted to do this for us and bring ourselves to other people to help them. But when we lose that, then we lose our focus completely. And we go back to that old language again of, I'm not good enough. I'll never make this. It's, all those things that we tell ourselves. And so you have to start over again and find that point where I call it where your roots land. And am I at the beginning point where I don't know what I don't know? Or am I at that point where I'm just still figuring things out? Or am I at that point where I've gotten used to this so much that I'm bored? I've lost my focus.
Could be bored. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen it too, like where it's kind of like, they want to hit that 10 million, but they just kind of keep, I guess, kind of playing some of the like you're saying, kind of that old programming, maybe some of the stuff that maybe got them to their first million, but that's not necessarily always what'll even get them to the second million. Have you ever seen that as well?
Yes. And there's a whole language around money too.
Yeah.
We all experience different hang-ups about money, and we also experience joy with money. And we have to examine that. It's a good exercise to examine how we feel about money. And a lot of it has to do with how we grew up.
Yeah.
How did our parents view money? How did they talk about money in the home? And so that language embeds itself in our mind and it stays there.
Yeah. We gave that money a certain meaning. And so we have certain emotions around it as well.
Exactly.
And certain responses. So I think in the book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, T. Harv Eker calls it like the money thermostat, basically. Yeah. Like, there's an internal money thermostat that says, okay, well, if you reach a certain point, like it's like your subconscious will kind of start doing some things that will keep you from exceeding that, because that doesn't feel right. Like that's not what we learned about money. That's not where we learned who we are, what we're capable of. Right.
And it's even things that we grew up with. It may not even pertain to money. But we use money a lot of times because it is such an emotionally charged word. And so sometimes it doesn't even, like I said, have anything to do with money. It has to do with, I'm feeling inadequate. I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
I need to do more. So when we hit that plateau of making a certain amount of money, we then get a little uneasy about it. It's like, okay, now what's next? Oh, I got to get there. I got to get there. I got to do this and I got to do that. And it's like, really chill out, it's chill out and listen to your mind.
Well, as you're talking there, it also, something that flashes in my mind too, is somebody working really hard to get to a point in their business, whether that's their first 100,000, their first million, but it's like they worked really hard. And so they think, I got to work really hard. And so sometimes that might even play out where it's like they still can't delegate and they don't know how to empower other people and lead other people to be successful. And so they still hold on to too much of it, and they're trying to control too much of it or do too much of it themselves because they're still playing that program. Like, I got to work harder. I got to do more.
Yes. Well, and I most of my clientele are women entrepreneurs. And so you can imagine the emotions and women especially work with their emotions all the time. But one of the things that we recognize with entrepreneurs is that, yes, they've developed this wonderful service or product, and they hold on to it. It's like their baby, and you don't want to let it go. And what happens then is they lose track again. They lose focus of what they're doing this for, and their intuition is not working. They're not working with their intuition and trust, and that comes from themselves too. They learn, to trust later on. But I find that with entrepreneurs, in that, once they get to a certain plateau, they also kind of lose this trust in themselves. It's like, I got here and now I need to do all these things. And you really don't have to work that hard at it if you keep that focus and keep aligned. And what I mean by aligned is there's this, when I talk about experiences, we're using our conscious body. We experience things with our body and our senses. And then with our subconscious mind, we attach that meaning to the experience. And then with our unconscious heart, that is where we create, and there's no judgment. And so that's the place we really want to get to, right? Is our unconscious heart. And we want to live in that space for a while, as long as we can, because that's the place where we can create the most. So when we're aligned with all three, we can move mountains, literally. I mean, like, we can move mountains, and do so many things.
Yeah. So again, if you can hit them up, what are the 3 levels again? Just to quickly summarize them again.
Yes, the 3 levels are the conscious body,
Okay.
the subconscious mind,
Okay.
and then the unconscious heart.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. And so it's just so people kind of know what's the difference between, because, like, I think people have heard the term subconscious and unconscious.
Yes.
Well, what's the difference? Can you tease that part apart a little bit more? Yeah.
So the subconscious is that part, like I said, that attaches a meaning to an experience. And a lot of times we attach a meaning to that experience and it sticks. It'll stick forever. So, for example, if we, let's just say we failed at making our 300 game in bowling, right? We failed at that. And so every time we go bowling now from that day forward, we're going to think of that. Oh my gosh, I'll never make it. I'll never make it. So you really don't, because that language is working within you.
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing how that language works. And then we go to the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is that place of, it's like the dream state. Right. And there's a book by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and don't ask me to spell his last name, but
how do you spell that? No.
It's Mihaly. If you can get Mihaly in at Amazon, it'll come up. It's called Flow. And he talks a lot about artists and athletes and writers being in flow. And what that means is, like, you can focus on something and the whole world just seems to fade away. Time, there's no time, no sense of time.
Yeah.
And, you forget to eat and things like that, And so that's the unconscious heart at work. And so when we can blend all 3 of those states of mind together, we have the memory that we can work with, right? The memory is our golden nugget. Like, okay, what was it about that game that I hated, that I didn't make that 300? What was that emotion? And so when we go back and look at that emotion, it's like, well, okay, I just have to be perfect. And that's what my whole hang up is, right? And so when you work with that, it's like, oh, I really don't need to be perfect, because no one on the planet is perfect, right? And so if we know that everyone else is not perfect, then it's not such a hard struggle. And that's what we work with in the mental world when we're coaching.
Wow. Well, thank you. So, we talked about NLP and emotional wisdom, and that programming that we all basically have. And I think, we have to run the sponsor real quick here for a second. When we get back, I think we'll tie this in quite a bit to the next topic, but it's the shift to focus into how healing from the past helps us achieve more in the future, and what we can do about that. So I look forward to that second half. And Jason, can you go ahead and run the sponsor? Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flory, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and we're back. Kat, you know Dr. Flory, right?
I sure do.
Yeah.
I love Dr. Flory.
Yeah. He's got a lot of wisdom about the body and the health.
Very
and
intelligent.
Yes. All right. So I'm really excited about digging into this because I think in society, it's kind of like we're taught just to just push forward. I mean, we were kind of talking about that before, but in a way, it's like just move on. Dust yourself off, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and just keep pushing, right?
Yeah.
And that works for some people, sort of. But I see a lot of I see a lot of destruction in some of those wakes, that they've kind of left behind. But I guess how does like healing from the past play a role in like our success in the future?
Well, again, it's those attachments to the events, and there's events, incidents, and accidents. I should explain that further. So an event is something that happens every day. We get up, we brush our teeth, we go to work, and those are things that we expect to happen every day.
Yeah.
And an incident is, okay, we're driving to work and someone cuts us off, and it's really not this big deal, unless you're in an emotional state, right? And so that's an incident where someone just cuts you off, but it's really not earth shaking, right?
Yeah.
And an accident is something we totally don't expect. A rock drops on our, a boulder drops on our car, we don't expect that. And with knowing all of those ideals and explanations of those, I should say, we attach an emotion to those, right? And so our attach, and this is where the healing comes in. When we are in, say, an accident, do we react or do we respond? Right?
What's the difference?
And when we react, we might be screaming and crying and running all over the place, and the policemen come and they can't get control of you, and you're just keep crying and you can't even get an explanation out of what happened. And so that is a reaction. That's what we call emotional spinning, where it's just out of control. Another type of spinning is when you're having a conversation and you are focused on one subject, and the person that you're speaking with starts talking about the cat at home, and they start talking about, well, the cat did this yesterday, it was so cute, and they start talking about something totally different, unrelated to what your subject is. And so that's another form of spinning.
Okay.
Another form.
So we shouldn't necessarily just take that personally. Is that what you're saying? Like,
that's right.
Was I really boring right there? So, all right, continue.
That's right.
What's the next form of spinning?
Yeah, the next form of spinning is what you just said, taking something personally.
Oh.
Like,
okay.
Oh, that's reacting, right? That's reacting like, how dare you say that? Did you hear them say that? And then they start a gossip session and they keep going on. And so there's these different reactive methods that we use in order to push things away. We push things away. It's this state of mind that we don't want to deal with right now. And when we don't want to deal with it, then we push it in the closet until it comes up again and we react again. Okay. And so the healing part is we take this through a progressive way of speaking, conversation. And the conversation is structured. And the structure for healing, especially, is called timeline. Okay. Excuse me.
You're good.
And timeline is an exercise that we do with our clients, and we walk them back in time. And there's different methods. And the method we use is disassociating from the emotion, right? And so I use a technique called up on the roof. And so I take the client virtually, and we go up on the roof, and we're gazing down at all the incidents that happened throughout their life, all the events. And we ask them to light up all of those events. And it's a very quiet, low tone voice when we use that. And so it is actually a hypnotherapy session with the client being awake. And so the client can walk all the way back, like most people can walk back to when they were born. And then we start talking about the emotions. What stands out? What do you notice? And that is a part of the healing process. It's just recognizing what happens. And then when we find the emotion, that is a part of emotional spinning.
Okay.
And so we walk them forward to realize, okay, this is what was happening back when I was, say, 5 years old. You know, for example, I can give you a really good example, a personal example. When I was 5 to 7 years old, my dad used to come home, and he would lay on his back and like a bug in the air with his hands and feet up in the air. And the three of us children would go taking a running leap and land on his hands and feet. Well, when I turned 7 years old, we were doing the same thing. And I took a running leap, and my dad retracted, and he says, no, you're too big. You can't do that anymore. And there was no explanation to it. I know, now that he was trying to protect both of us so we wouldn't get hurt. But back then, I took that as, I'm too big. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And so I followed that. I mean, that stayed with me for years and years, not even knowing until I did a timeline with Kate Michaels. And I did a timeline with her and realized, oh my gosh, that is why I think this way, that I'm not worthy, of making that money. I'm not worthy of succeeding. And even though I was successful and, is in my own right, but I really wasn't thinking that way. Wow. And so that is part of the healing. And I was 58 years old when that's a long time to wait for that, to understand that.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame because a lot of people think that, well, like we said before, you're just supposed to deal with it.
Right.
And, that's one method, but it does. What was the experience for you, I guess, just to help people kind of think? So the experience, the difference between like pre-healing and going through that process, what was different about life, about how you felt, about what you did after that healing process?
Well, I know that I always wanted to write, for example, and I went into the corporate world, and, it was always, there was another language going through my mind when I was growing up, is like, you have to make it. You have to make it. Even though all these other languages are in your head, you have to make it. And so when I was growing up, women did not even go to college. We weren't offered that. And it was, in fact, we were supposed to get married and have children. Yeah. And so all those programs were running through my head, even though I got married very young and had children very young, went through a lot of experiences, but I struggled. I really struggled with that. I really want to write. I want to be a writer. And I struggled with it most of my life. I knew that I was supposed to be a writer from the time I was 7, but it didn't come about, but it was still in my heart. Right. And so it was still that struggle, like I can't write, or you're not good. So I wouldn't write, but that was bottled up in me. Like there was something waiting to get out. Right. And so this happens to people all the time. Like when they were a kid, they knew what they were supposed to do, but they never did it. And I reach women now, like in their 50s and older. I reach women now that it's like, I always wanted to go kayaking, or I always wanted to go climbing a mountain, or I wanted to hike or do, well, what's holding you back? What is holding you back? And it's these programs that we have running in our head. And that's the difference between before and then afterwards. My goodness, when I learned that, hey, you can do anything you want, I started taking writing classes and courses, and I just started writing like there was no tomorrow. I can write for 4 to 6 hours every day if I was allowed to. Need to eat, right? I need to eat. And
yeah, I guess so.
And I have clients.
You could probably get like some sort of IV drip or something like that.
Yes. But that's a difference, though. I mean, there's so many, there's all different kinds of healing, right? There's physical trauma. I went through that as well. Physical trauma and mental trauma and emotional trauma, all kinds of trauma that people go through, and no one's immune from it. Everyone goes through some level of trauma. And so it's great to have this coach in your corner to walk you through some of these things to help you get past it. So you don't have to live till you're 58 to figure it out, right?
Yeah. So kind of going back to the difference between reacting and responding, do you feel like before the healing, you had more of a tendency to react, but after the healing and going through that process, you're able to I guess make more of a choice about how you're going to respond? Is that a way of kind of summarizing it?
Yes, and responding, and a lot of people confuse this a lot too, that reacting and responding is like always this place where we throw up our arms and we're like reacting to something like the accident and lady running around like our hair's on fire, versus having this Zen feeling. And it's not like that all the time. There are different levels of reacting and responding. And so reacting would be, okay, there's this voice in me that says I'm not good enough. That's reacting.
Okay.
Responding is when someone tells you you're not good enough, and you can look them in the eye and say, okay, that's your thought, and walk away. And not have this, like I have to respond to what they're saying to me. Or, in the industry, in any industry, right? There's such competition. And the people that struggle the most are the ones that are struggling inside.
Yeah.
The leaders are the ones that they lead through their own example. They don't worry about what everyone else is doing. They don't set the bar because someone else has a higher bar. They set their own bar.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I think I've brought this example up in previous episodes, but it's interesting to look at it in this perspective because I had a client, and I asked him, why did you start your business? It was interesting because he took it with, well, because I worked for a jerk and I wanted to create a business that was better than working for the jerk, and I'm like, so you set the bar of not being as bad as that jerk in terms of your leadership? He's like, oh, yeah, I guess so.
Well, the idea would be what is it about the jerk that bothers you so much first?
Sure. Yeah.
What makes the guy a jerk? Because that's your language saying that guy's a jerk. Right. And so you try to figure that out first. And I had to do that too. I had a very overbearing boss who just ran numbers and didn't even care about the people. In fact, he called people names, and it was just a terrible example of a leader.
Yeah.
And I went to a coach who did not do NLP or emotional wisdom training, and she mostly analyzed personalities. And she's like, look, she goes, you're just going to have to kiss it up to this guy. And it was very difficult for me to hear that, because I had to work with myself, and I had this, okay, what is it about this guy that you hate so much? And I hated that he wasn't kind, and that I'm an advocate for people who aren't treated well. Right.
Yeah.
I'm like the mother, bear with her claws out. And that's something I don't tolerate well, is a lack of kindness in people. And so I will stand up for them. But that is a program that I run. It's like, don't tell me that you're going to take this guy out because he had a bad attitude, or he didn't find out why he had a bad attitude.
Yeah.
Find out what's going on there instead of just firing him. And, so that was my experience with, like learning to deal with people who are very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that I set then was, you work with the people first and the rest will come.
Mm-hmm.
That was my response to that boss.
So it was interesting. You said kind of first looking at, okay, so why is that person a jerk, right? And what makes that person a jerk? I mean, in your eyes, because it sounds to me like once you start to kind of identify what that is, it helps you to put some language to it, I guess. And
you might be able to work with that person after you figure it out. Like you become a team player then more than you were before.
Well, what I love about thinking about this stuff as like a leader or even a team member is that to realize that everybody kind of has their own programming, and something happened in their life with this person that made them think that they had to respond react to stress this way, calling people names, pushing people harder, being a jerk.
Yes.
And so if somebody has some awareness, how do they use this awareness to take those steps with somebody like that? Like how can they open the door and for that conversation, or what should they do?
Yeah, that could, in a corporate structure, that might be challenging in a way. You have to start with your executives, of course. You have to start at the top, and they have to have the buy-in. They have to have the buy-in to a program that does that. And I can tell you, I was involved with a very large company, a worldwide company, where we had continuous improvement groups that would come, and we would, do our continuous improvement projects in various locations. And so I was a part of that, but we rolled out this positive mental attitude thing, but it wasn't no one was being held accountable, and it was just kind of went all over the place. And so when you work with corporate executives, you really have to get their buy-in and to tell them what it can do for them. Tell what it can do for them, because that's what they need. That's a subconscious mind needing some information. And so when you help them with that, then you should be on your way. But what I noticed too in meetings, for example, if you're the leader in a meeting, and I know that I've been involved with multiple meetings, being the leader throughout the Midwest, and you always have at least one person that sits there like this. They're not going to talk, and they're not going to be involved, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this, and that doesn't work, and this doesn't work. And so you hear all those things, those negative things. And so the best practice with something like that is to ask them what is it that they would do. That stops them in their tracks. And that appeals to that subconscious mind, that subconscious thinking of, those blocks that they're working through, that they're not even realizing that they're like that. Yeah. They just want things to be the same. And that's part of the MO of the subconscious. No change. Let's just keep it as it is. Let's not work with this. But when you work with people like that, you get them involved, because that's what the subconscious ego wants. It wants recognition. And so that's an easy way of involving someone who's not going to work with the group at the very beginning. Get them involved.
That's a good point. Yeah, if somebody's kind of dragging their feet or being a naysayer, Get them involved and ask them, okay, well,
And it
what
happens.
would you do? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess probably not in a sarcasm or a sarcastic way. Like,
No,
well, what would
no,
you do? Right? Like
no, absolutely
that's not
not.
what
The
you're.
tone is everything, right? And as a
Right.
leader, leaders learn that tone is everything. And
Yeah.
words, the meaning of words.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So with the healing process, we go from reacting to being able to respond more wisely, I guess, because we were
Yes.
talking in the first half, talking about emotional wisdom training, which is kind of part of a big part of what you do.
Yes.
Teaching people, I guess, how to better recognize what's going on, the emotions around that, and have the wisdom to choose how they want to respond to those situations moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah, and I often see. I often see a lot of people though, like they really beat themselves up about the things that they did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
The mistakes they made, and how can we like kind of heal from that to let that not be an anchor to us?
Well, we actually want that to be an anchor, right? We
Okay,
want to remember
interesting.
that, right? We don't want to, some coaching platforms will encourage the person to, they call it flipping the
Hmm.
emotion. We don't do that at all. I mean, we want to recognize that emotion and see how it really works for us, right? If we're
Okay.
saying we're not good enough, then what are we not good enough at? Let's talk about more about that, and let's dig into that, and we can realize that, the things that I wasn't good enough are the things that I have the most empowering ways of doing, because I kept saying I can't do it, but I was doing it. And most people
Mm,
learn that. It's like, well, you're already doing that. And so we
interesting.
use that to empower people and learn to build their stories. We have a course right now going on about the art of telling your story. And so we use that information to build on our stories and to help ourselves, but to also help other people. That's part of extending that outward, that gratitude
Hmm.
of giving the ripple effect.
Hmm. Well, and what I often see, and we've only got a couple more minutes left
Yes.
here, but I think what I often see is that people will, I guess they don't look at how those emotions that are tied to the mistakes of the past or the failures or that how some of that serves them, and once they can, I guess, recognize
Mm-hmm.
how the emotions or those decisions serve some of that programming, then they can
Yeah.
use that to make different decisions and more wise decisions in the future. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Yes, but and most people can't do that alone, right?
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
to have someone walk them through it, and you can't do
Yeah.
it in one session.
Right.
There's this,
Right.
most often it takes about 8 months, and this is another Forbes quote, that it takes about 8 months to form a habit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a new habit, right? We can reprogram ourselves to form new habits. And
Right. Right.
it's a healthy thing because it starts neurons in our brain, new neurons, and it creates a healthy brain.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you have to really engage in a program in order to get through all of that. And it's a lot of stuff to
Absolutely.
pack up and take with you in the future and in the present, right?
Yep.
And so you have to
Yep.
unpack it and
Yep.
check it out and see where you are. And there's always a good guide, with Emotional Wisdom Training Institute. We have
Yeah.
coaches that do all that. And
Yeah.
yes.
Well, that's a great point. Well, how can people get a hold of you or find you out there in the world?
So I am a subcontracting instructor for Emotional Wisdom Institute,
Hmm.
Emotional Wisdom Training Institute, I should say. And
Yeah.
you can contact me at my phone number at 314-359-2467, or
Hmm.
you can email ewti.studentcenter@gmail.com, and that's through
Hmm.
the EWTI. And that is
Awesome.
Emotional Wisdom Training Institute, and we train coaches, leaders, and anyone that really wants to work on themselves.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kat, and
Welcome.
have a lot of respect for you, and appreciate all that you've done to support me, and as I go through some of that
You're most
training as
welcome.
well, and all that.
Most
So very
welcome.
very powerful stuff.
Yes.
So, and thank you for watching. Again, this is a call to action. Take what we've talked about today and apply it in your business and your life. And feel free to reach out for more.
Yes. We
I
have
can help you.
classes
She can
running
help
all
you.
the time. Yes.
She can help you. Sorry, I guess it was weird. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
All right. You too. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful strategies and tools for creating the business and life of your dreams.